Next, I want to welcome Dr. Kelly Davidson. Dr. Kelly Davidson is an assistant professor of applied economics at the University of Delaware, specializing in behavioral and experimental economics within the food and agricultural sectors. She teaches courses such as strategic selling and buyer communication, international agricultural trade and marketing, and strategic marketing competition. Raised on a farm, Kelly integrates her practical experience with academic expertise to enhance agricultural policy and practice.
All right, thank you all so much. It's truly an honor to be here. I think I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. I want to give a special note of thanks to Sarah Meyer, co-author and graduate student on this project, who did a deep dive into Armayas Kerbab's research and was inspired by the idea of methane-reducing feed additives and brought it to me as an undergraduate project, which is what inspired this work. So super happy for Sarah to introducing me to this space, and I'm thrilled to be here in an audience that cares about this work. I want to start out with kind of defining one tiny piece of behavioral economics. Ginger mentioned a nudge. So what is a nudge? A nudge is a subtle cue that influences behavior without actually knowing that you're being influenced. It's very different than a regulation. A good example is when there's a recycling bin next to a trash bin. You're more motivated to recycle, right? In food marketing, they've really capitalized on nudging by placing the highest value products at eye level in the supermarket. Take a look next time you're shopping for groceries. My work focuses on behavioral nudges in the producer space as well as the consumer space to understand the role of information. So kind of a small nudge, very cost-effective, but could be high impact on communicating information. So in looking at the potential for methane-reducing feed additives, we were in this literature especially excited about the potential for seaweed, but had the question, what is the market potential of these feed additives from the consumer perspective? Would consumers be willing to pay a premium for low methane beef, essentially? And back to this idea of nudging, what is the role of informational nudges in motivating consumers to pay that premium or to adopt low methane beef in their diets? We conducted a randomized experiment using, I'll talk later, 3,009 consumers in the United States. To look at different information treatments. So just like you do on-farm trials with treatments and controls, we did information treatments. A control where groups received no information, a treatment group where consumers saw the information about the role of climate change and agriculture's role in climate change and methane emissions, which I'll show in a minute, as well as point-of-purchase labeling, so that in-store nudge that might move consumers to purchase a low-methane beef option. In the nature of rising beef prices, we were also curious about beef sensitivity, if there's kind of a threshold where none of this matters because beef prices are so high. And so we also randomized a low price and high price treatment across this set of consumers. Because we all know the average price of ground beef rose 13% from 2019 to 2021. This survey was conducted, we were in the design phases in 2021, and the survey was conducted in March of 2022. So our information treatment, we drew from EPA, the literature out there, to give consumers some basic facts in our pre-purchase information treatment. So again, the control group received no information, but the pre-information treatment group, and some were combined also with the label, received information about enteric fermentation and greenhouse gas emissions, citing that cattle production is the largest emitter of methane from human activity. In addition to pre-purchase information, some of the consumers in our treatment groups received information in the form of a point-of-purchase label, a label on the product, stating the effectiveness of the methane-reducing feed additives. So everyone was given definitions of the feed additives, And the people in the point of purchase treatment group were also given information based on the median efficacy rates from the literature. And I should note that the additives that we were looking at were decisions between selecting conventional beef that is currently on the market versus ground beef produced from cattle that were fed 3-NOP, the seaweed additive, or the essential oil garlic and lemon citrus extracts. So this is an example of our choice card with the point of purchase label. So consumers made decisions where the prices were varying on each set of choice cards. They were always choosing between conventional ground beef or one of the 3 feed additive options, and prices were varying so that you get you kind of can measure that market share and willingness to pay as the prices vary based on which option they select. Our consumers in our sample made 8 different decisions. So we were looking at the combination of decisions given those information treatments as well as the price variations. So this was a nationally representative survey of 3,009 consumers that we conducted via Qualtrics using a Qualtrics panel of only ground beef consumers. We know that there may be potential to capture some non-beef eaters, those who have opted out due to environmental reasons, but we decided for the purpose of this study to exclude them from the samples. I should also note, when we're in the supermarket, we see a lot of labels on our products, right? But by isolating that methane impact, we're able to look at just the effect of having a low methane label, so we didn't overwhelm consumers with all of the other labels. An extension of this work might be to use eye tracking devices to see how consumers would pay attention to a low methane label as opposed to like organic certified or the grade A beef type of labels that you typically see. So we had 7 treatment groups and 1 control between the combinations of our pre-information, point of purchase information, as well as the high and low price groups. So in each treatment group, we had approximately 375 respondents. I saved you from the mathematical equations and the regression results, so sorry if I'm disappointing you on that, but I thought I would just give you some key takeaways. So what we calculated were market shares as well as willingness to pay. And conventional ground beef was very much preferred when information was not at play. However, the seaweed additive in particular has market potential to capture some of the conventional beef market share. So for those of you non-economists in the room, market share is, if of all of the available beef consumers in the market, what portion of that market would belong to the different product. And so we were looking at conventional 3-NOP seaweed as well as the essential oils. The 3-NOP and essential oils, even with information and with those definitions, didn't perform nearly as well as the seaweed. I'm kind of glad to see that aligns with the work that Jamie has done. So we really are seeing the most potential for, not surprisingly, the highest reduction levels, right? So information really mattered. That combined information of giving information about climate change combined with a low methane label that states the methane reduction levels, consumers really responded to that higher level of methane reduction. They got excited about the potential for the seaweed feed additive reducing up to 95%. So some numbers, our control group with no information, conventional ground beef captured 62% of the market, with 14% going to seaweed and 14% going to essential oil. But when you layered on those information treatments, particularly that combined information of a low methane label with the environmental greenhouse gas emissions generic information, conventional drops from 62% of the market share down to 30%. And some of that is captured by particularly the seaweed additive. There's little evidence of price sensitivity. We didn't really find impacts across the price treatments, although the information was a little bit more effective at the lower price treatments. Little to no demand for the essential oils and the 3-knot. Not a lot of statistically significant changes between our groups in those additives. So kind of takeaways and policy recommendations that we came up with in this paper. What I've not listed on the slide, I think communication is key, information is key. So I think back to my childhood and the Got Milk campaign. That was super effective, right? So in this space, moving towards some kind of communication campaign around methane emissions. Having grown up on a cattle farm and my dad still farms beef, we've got to get away from this message that not eating beef is the answer, right? There are other solutions out there. And so making those campaign initiatives around sustainable beef, like maybe the Roundtable for Sustainable Beef initiatives. We recommended supporting the commercial seaweed industry to scale up production to be able, I know that supply chain issues are one barrier to the seaweed feed additive coming to market. But then, again, investing in information campaigns, whether that's a checkoff program or government program, but those low methane labels could make an impact. We took the numbers from our calculated market shares and compared them to efficacy levels of methane reduction and calculated that with information, with getting awareness out there and with a low methane label, we could potentially reduce methane emissions by 36 to 48%, so meeting some of those targets that have been talked about the last 3 days. However, what we're not really finding is a strong willingness to pay a premium for ground beef that's fed these additives. That was the hypothesis going in. You know, could a farmer market their beef as low methane ground beef? Not finding a lot of strong evidence for that, and so our policy recommendation kind of moved towards, again, aligning with Jamie, subsidizing farmers to adopt these feed additives. I think that's all. I put a QR code to the full paper if you want to read it, published in Food Policy with all the regressions and the market share numbers and calculations. And certainly feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Look forward to the questions.